Hey guys, Sparrow here, and I know it's been a long time since I've made a video, and thank you so much for sticking with me and my channel. But I just wanted to check in with you and let you know a couple of things, where I've been, what I've been doing, etc. Wow, yeah. The last couple years, last year and a half-ish, have been pretty intense. I guess I'll start by telling you, um, I went through menopause, and I had no idea how amazing it was going to be and how tough it was going to be. Physically, I did okay because I'm a nutritionist. I'm into self-care, so I knew the things to take, I knew the things to do. Um, and I was excited for it. I was ready for it. What I didn't quite understand, and I had said this to other people, but you never really know until it happens to you, is when you go through menopause, it regurgitates everything that you maybe didn't fully deal with that happened to you in your life. And I'm a person who really tries to deal with things head on. I've had a lot of early childhood trauma. You guys know I wrote a book. And I've never been afraid to feel things, to look at things that other people point out. I've had therapy several times in my life. And this was different. This was, wow, all the things that I thought I had healed, but maybe I had intellectualized and hadn't really felt came up. And they came up in steps and waves. And it really made me relook at my entire life, everything. It was like taking your purse and just dumping it out and looking at my career, my trajectory, what I had done in my life, choices I had made, mistakes I had made, value systems, and just regurgitate, like clearing out everything. And so, you know how when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, the chrysalis, or whatever that's called, the cocoon, right? Um, it liquefies before it is able to reassemble its molecules and come out as butterfly. And I feel like that is me right now. I'm like, wow, I completely liquefied and now I'm reassembling my molecules. And what is it going to look like? That's the part that's really intriguing because Hmm. I had no idea what was going to transpire, but I asked. I'm a faithful Christian. If you guys don't know that, and I'm not really a traditional Christian in the in the traditional sense. I am a faithful Christian, but I'm a little more aligned with. Um, I don't know. I kind of call myself a cosmic Christian because I believe in, the Bible, but I read it a little bit differently. I read it with more of a supernatural lens, maybe with, thinking more of like even technology, and so forth. And so, yeah. So I said, God, I try to pray every day. I said, God, what do you want from me at this point? I'm mush now. I'm liquefied. By the way, guys, I took a break from my marriage. I moved out of our big house, moved into a little house. I just wanted to be alone. I wanted to, have a sojourn, basically just this time for me that I never really took because I was so busy taking care of everybody else. My whole life, it's all I ever knew how to do, which is probably why I went into therapy and mental health, right? I wanted to help people, and I was so good at it. I was so good at it. And I went back into therapy these last couple years, by the way, and my therapist said something to me one time that just almost knocked me off this chair. And I said, he's asked me about self-care. I said, well, yeah, I went and got my nails painted, I got a massage. And he said, look, self-care isn't about making yourself pretty. It's about setting boundaries and doing what's best for you and putting your needs first. And I was like, oh yeah, not so great at that always. And it's not for lack of intention. I've always been like, Yeah, I want to put myself first, and next week, next year, then I'll do this, and then something always came up, right, that seemed to have more importance or more weight. Well, that went away with menopause, and then I was just like, no, 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 this is my time. So I moved into my little sanctuary, and yeah, trying to figure out what that looks like for my future, right? And am I supposed to be alone? Am I supposed to adopt kids? I never had biological children. I've, had some bonus children, which have been great, but what am I supposed to do? And I don't know. But I asked God one day, career-wise, I said, what do you want? What do you want me to do? And I said, I've had this background. I studied mental health, psychology, counseling. I wrote a book on trauma recovery. I've worked in my own trauma. I went back to school and studied, functional nutrition, and I've helped people with chronic illness and disease and, how to get healthy, how to lose weight. I've done all the things. What do you want me to do now? And God was really clear. And he said to me, teach my people how to live. And I heard it. It's like spoken out of my chest. Teach my people how to live. I said, okay, I can do that. I can do that. And then, so I got online Googling, okay, how do I do that? How do I bundle all of this into this is how you live, folks, right? If you're a Christian, but if you, not only if you're a Christian and you're called to Christ, but if you want to be your best self and if you want to transcend this world, because, I do believe we are in a fallen, broken world and I believe we can transcend it, but how do we overcome ourselves first before we can overcome the world? So then I was like, oh, okay, I got it. I create a ministry because in a ministry, I can talk about all of those things, right? Okay. So, how do I do that? Whatever. Looking through that. And then I was praying one day and I heard the words very clearly, again, kind of spoken inside of me, the Church of Christos. And it's like, wow, what does that mean? And I'm kind of slow sometimes, guys. I'm a bit of a late bloomer. And what's so funny is for 2 years, I have had this post-it on my computer, and I was reading the Bible, and this verse spoke to me. And I said, let me write it down. I don't know, it really spoke to me. Matthew 16:18. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Funny, right? And so that's why I think God gives us our mission in stages and in breadcrumbs because we can't see the big picture. So I've had this on my computer forever, never thinking for a moment I would start a church. Even when I got the Church of Christos, okay, the Church of Christos. So I got online. Maybe I'm supposed to join the Church of Christos. Well, there wasn't one. And so then another piece of the puzzle came probably about a year before I got this idea for a ministry. I was talking to God one day and I said, God, help me understand the symbol of the cross. The Catholics have the crucifix, they have Jesus on the cross, which hurts me to see. The Protestants have a cross with, no Jesus. Sometimes there's a cloth, hanging on the cross. And I heard God and he kind of laughed and he said, well, we don't use the cross in where I'm from. And I just thought, well, that would make sense. I said, well, what do you use? Will you share it with me? And he did. And he burned this symbol in my brain. I'm gonna show it to you. It's another one I've had on my computer. It's this symbol. Can you see it? And I said, wow, that's beautiful. And that's just my rendition of it. It looked much more beautiful in my head. I said, what is that, God? He said, well, it's perfect pi. Perfect pi. Pi in this realm is 3.14. And the reason it is, and if you look at the pi symbol, it's slanted. The reason it's slanted is because we're in a fallen, broken world, right? We are a resemblance of heaven, of the heavenly realm, the 5D, whatever you want to call it. Uh, but it's reflected through a broken mirror. And I said, oh. I get it. Okay. So this is perfect pi, which is three, which is the foundation of all creation and the Trinity. And so I was so moved by this. I had it made into a necklace and I took it to this acquaintance of mine who's a jeweler. And I said, "Can you make this for me?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I've been wearing this for probably over a year now. But again, I got the symbol and then well, no, I got this first and then the symbol. And then I got the idea for the ministry. I think that's how it came. Yes. And then the Church of Christos, or those might have come at the same time or close to it. But anyway, it's been a breadcrumb. It's been like, wow, okay. And even when I first heard the Church of Christos, like I said, it didn't dawn on me to start a church. And then one day in prayer, it all came together. It was like, well, you have the symbol, you have the name, you have the calling. Oh, and my name, changing my name. So I changed my name back in 2020. It was shortly after my book came out. So I, my first book, Writing Standing Up, I had to choose a pen name. And I chose Sparrow Spalding because uh, it's a tell-all of my childhood. And I was afraid one or two people might sue me. And so I was like, I better change names and I'll change my name too. Protect everyone's identity as well. Well, my book did pretty well, and people started calling, and they all wanted to talk to Sparrow. Nobody wanted to talk to me, my old name, and so it felt right to eventually change it legally. It just felt like once I wrote that book and told my absolute shame story, right? I didn't feel like that woman anymore, that girl. And so I stepped into my new name. And how I chose Sparrow, by the way, came from being 9 years old and sitting in church. And for a while there, I was raised in an evangelical church. And it had its pros and cons, trust me. But I remember hearing a Bible verse. And in the New Testament, Jesus talks about the sparrow several times, right? And how precious the sparrow is, basically, or, you can buy them a dime a dozen. But humans are even more valuable than sparrows. And I just remember having the thought, well, if I could at least be as valuable as a sparrow, I'd be doing okay. And I was such an animal lover too. I always have been, but ever since, childhood. Animal lover, always rescuing, saving frogs, snakes, birds, kitties, didn't matter, bunnies. So it all came together and I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. Now, oh, and back up. So these last couple years of intensity, uh, God called me to move. So we moved to a small town, 12,000 people, and I couldn't understand why, but I was called. And real quickly, I understood. There was a priest here that I was supposed to work with. Now, I was baptized as a Catholic. I was not raised as a Catholic. I didn't do a Holy Communion or a confirmation or anything like that. But something pulled me to this church and to this particular priest. And I worked with him for a year. And I did all of the courses, the adult catechism, I think they call it the RCIA courses. And in the end, I didn't complete that journey because spiritually something said no. And then I did some research. I was like, there are some things I love about the Catholic Church, and there are some things I really don't agree with. However, there are some very holy people in the church, and God led me straight to one. And working with him for a year, I just poured it all out. I mean, I met with him weekly and just cried and cried and cried. I had some real spiritual wounding I had a father who was abused by a priest in his youth. I had a mother who had a lot of religious wounding. I had some in the church growing up. And he just really helped heal my spirit. And also, I did a whole life confession, um, which some people really have issue with confession if it's done with the right person. It's so healing and so transformational. And I think it's something that the Protestant churches really miss out on. I mean, I went back to age 7 and confessed everything, and it felt so good. And it wasn't a place for shame, it was a place for release and renewal. And the Greek word for that, and what I prefer to call it, is a metanoia. And a metanoia is just a complete repentance and a rebirth. So, in the Protestant religion, how they talk about being born again, this was my being born again process. And it was so transformational, but it wasn't the end of the journey. So I did all of that work, and there's more to it than that. I did a big consecration, and that was, one morning I'm sitting there at my kitchen island. I think I was chopping fruit, and I heard a voice, and it said, "You must consecrate yourself." And I've heard the word, I really hadn't used it. And I'll be honest, I didn't have like a real deep understanding of it. So I researched and Googled and was like, okay, what does it mean to consecrate? And so I went through that process and I did consecrate. And then I heard a voice, months and months later, now you must sanctify. What does that look like? Anyway, guys, long story short, I went through this whole journey. And on top of that, after I worked with this priest, then I went back and did Jungian analysis with one of the greatest therapists I've ever met. And he really held my feet to the fire. So, a lot of the things that I pulled up spiritually that I needed to heal, I also had to heal from from a therapy perspective, and some hurts that came up. I had to process those. I had to really work with my inner children. I mean, I just splayed myself, guys, just did it. And again, I was doing it for myself because I have always thought when you heal yourself, you really heal the planet. And, before we go judging and, telling other people how they should live, you know, clean up your own house. It's always been my belief. And so I worked so hard on that, just so hard. And then, here I am, going through the menopause stuff and then setting radical boundaries. You may not drain my energy. You may not steal my joy. You may not require too much of my time. And those were hard boundaries to set with people that I love. And, not all of it went over very well. And that's okay. That's okay. I can sit with that now and be okay in that space. And, a lot of this channel, I've talked about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. And I realized, so funny, you talk about things, but I realized that I had been battling narcissism, not just in partnerships, but in relationships with friends, family, coworkers, my entire existence. And, there's only one reason and only one explanation for that, in my humble opinion. And that is because it is a spiritual attack. Now, I can intellectualize narcissism all day long. I have the degree, I understand the DSM very well, but there is a spiritual component that just isn't talked about enough. And it is directly from the enemy. And in my opinion, it comes from, it's just like the measles virus getting, unleashed upon the planet. Narcissism has been unleashed upon the planet as a virus, as a spiritual virus that infects. And just like a computer, that gets a virus, by the way, and we'll talk about it later, but we are computers with our own battery pack. So just like a computer, you click on something wrong and it slowly starts to infiltrate and you don't notice it much at first, but then slowly your computer gets slower and slower and slower, and then you get pop-ups or whatever until at some point it's completely taken over by the virus. That is the spirit of narcissism, guys. And it's very real. So throughout all of this, then I also had to radically accept the fact that I was a huge target my whole life. And the fact that I'm still here, which by the way, I also this past year and a half, I uncovered a near-death experience that I can't wait to share with you because it still boggles my mind. And it's not like your average near-death experience. This one is pretty supernatural and out there. Anyway, it has been a constant attack to prevent me from doing what I'm doing right now, which is starting this movement and this church. So now that I recognize that, I'm like, phew, okay, I get it. I understand now why I've been attacked by people completely out of left field for no apparent reason. Um, why some people have just had it out for me. There's been lots of people who've loved me and say, hey, I love your energy. And, I have lots of great friends, but there have been really targeted attacks. And I can't wait. I'm going to share every last one of them with you guys. And I can't wait because for those who have ears to hear, you'll be blown away and you'll probably be able to relate it to your own life in some way, being like, wow, I never saw that as an attack. And yet it was. So, so that's where I've been. I'm still going to be talking about narcissism on this channel because it is such a virus for God's chosen. And God's chosen are people who come here specifically with a purpose. And you'll know because you have that sense like, I'm here to fulfill something. And sometimes it's really clear. And sometimes, like me, you got a breadcrumb to get there. And you'll have bits and pieces of the puzzle, but you won't have the whole thing. And but you'll be able to look at your life and go, I'm really called to Jesus, even if you weren't raised as a Christian. I was raised with religion sporadically, but my mom, she did have a faith, even though she had some real struggles and she had a really dark side. She had faith. But something in me just always knew Jesus was real. He was, I wanted to get closer to him. I wanted to understand. I just was called. And you'll know. And he says, my sheep hear my voice. And so my message isn't going to be for everyone. It's not going to land with everybody. But for those of you who resonate and go, yeah, this makes sense to me, or yeah, this is me, please come along because the Church of Christos is birthing as we speak. And it's going to be a place not of judgment, not of dogma, but of information, how to reclaim your Christ identity and how to live and operate in this world so that you can, number one, transform and dare I say, overcome yourself so that then you can overcome this world because we can't overcome the world unless we overcome this. So I'm going to be giving really specific instruction, teachings, lectures, guidelines on how to do that. A lot of churches don't do it. You go on Sunday, and really what you experience is more of a production, a little bit of theatrics, with the music. And I'm not saying the music's bad. It's great. But you get a pastor on the stage, and a lot of times, like I said, it's theatrical. And they're speaking um, to your five senses to get your attention, and not always to move your spirit. And a lot of times people go, oh, yeah, that was a great soundbite, or oh, I feel better for a little while. But then they leave church and they go right back into their old behaviors, or they go right back into their unconsciousness. And I'm here to say, okay, this church is not going to be that. You're going to have practice, you're going to have discipline. This is going to be the wax on, wax off of overcoming, of overcoming. I'm going to give you my specific theories on things, and I will be the first person to tell you I don't know if I'm right. Sometimes God speaks things specifically to me, and I hear them inside my body. And I asked God, how do you do that? And he said, magnetic resonance. I said, oh, okay. I have some studying to do. I'm going to dig out that old copy of the holographic universe. Um, but other things are based on my theories of my years and years of study. And by the way, I'm not a Bible scholar. I've had my Bible since I was about 8 years old. I cherish it, but I read it, but I'm not a scholar. I don't have a PhD in theology. So I was a little bit surprised at first that God called me to this mission. But then it made sense. It was like, you know what? You know how to heal trauma. You know how to hold space for people as a therapist, as an energy healer. And God has given me some real tools for hands-on healing and even distance healing that I will share with you. I was born destined to be a healer and of a heart, of the body. And that's why I went and studied nutrition. God has put me through the paces and I've jumped through the hoops, guys, to be where I'm at here. So, he's like, no, you are the perfect choice and I've been preparing you. So, and I've even studied Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion, and I do bring some of those concepts because when I read the Bible, I sometimes can see the Eastern thought that comes in when Jesus talks about, not toiling and how the lilies, don't think about the future. They just are, they're just present. And so this is going to be like something you've never experienced, but this is going to be a real how to. So I'm truly excited. I don't consider myself a pastor or a minister, and I'd like to break away from that mentality. I call myself a fledgling, and anyone who comes and gathers at the Church of Christos is going to be a fledgling. And a fledgling is, a bird learning how to fly. And you'll watch fledglings, and they're so precious. They get off the ground for a little bit, and then they come back down. They get off the ground a little bit further, a little bit longer, and then sometimes they come back down. And we are all fledglings learning how to fly. And so I invite you to join me. Come check out our page, what the tenets of the Church of Christos are, and if it resonates with you. And if there are some things that resonate and some things that don't, that is okay. You can take what you like and leave the rest. I am not here to tell you how to think, what to believe. I'm only here to share and share my wisdom, share the messages I get. And I've had, guys, one of the things that I've never really shared with many people in life is my supernatural experiences. I've been having them since I was 2 years old, and I can remember that far back. But there's mental illness in my family, and I have always been more academic. And I wanted to stay in the academic lane, right? This makes logical sense. And I had this whole little world over here, this supernatural world that I really didn't share with many people. It was kind of between me and God. And God's like, nope, you're going to share it all now. And I've lost the fear of sharing. I'm going to share. There will be hate. People will call me names, especially more traditional type Christians are going to call me names, and it's okay. I'm prepared. I'm ready for it. I'm not going to argue it. I'm not going to debate. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to share what I have to share. And you know what? If it resonates, great. But the people who are ready for this message will find it and they will hear it. So that's what's been happening with me. I wanted to catch you guys up. I'm going to, with all luck, release my first lecture by this Sunday. So my goal is to release a lecture a week. And so, in order to, come on board with the Church of Christos, there's nothing you have to fill out. You don't have to be a member. I'm going to have some free community stuff that you can join. You don't have to leave your current church. This is just something completely separate. This is just a precious gathering of knowledge, materials, and people who believe in Christ. And again, Christos, going back to the old Greek. And I said, God, why Christos? Back to the old Greek. The New Testament was written in Greek. And that was just the message. And so I had to follow it. So I've been trying to learn some Greek. I don't know very much Greek, but I'm called and, I'm learning. And when I read the New Testament, I look, okay, what was the Greek word when, Jesus talks about love and hate? Let me look up those words. Did they really mean what we think they mean? No, they didn't. And so, these teachings are going to be like nothing else you've heard before. That I can promise you. A little supernatural, a little traditional, little Eastern gonna be sprinkled in, and a little philosophy, a little psychology, applying things to the bigger picture. Okay, this is how we interpreted this 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. How do we interpret it today with the technology lens that we have, with the knowledge of how the world works, with the messages that I sometimes get from Jesus, that I feel like I said spoken right in me. Yeah, so it's like I said, I can't wait in so much practical advice for everyday living because we are living in a fallen, broken world, and pastors and preachers don't give us specifics on, hey, this is why you may not want to drink that drink. This is why you may not want to get that poke. This is why you may not want to listen to that song. This is why you may not want to wear this type of clothing. I mean, we're going to go over everything. This is how you heal trauma. So again, guys, that's it in a nutshell. So much more coming. For those of you who have stuck with my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And, again, I'm a fledgling too. I'm still learning. I don't know everything that the future holds, but I have learned. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm still learning how to sit in the question mark. A wise person years ago once told me when you can learn how to sit in the question mark, sit in the unknown, and be okay, that's real spiritual power. So I'm still learning right along with everybody else, but that's what's happening. I want to say thanks again so much. Hug yourself from me, and then please click below, check out sparrowspalding.com, click on the Church of Christos link, and see what you think. Drop me a line. Hug yourself from me, guys. Take care.